Anyway, lastly, for our last story, we'll be talking about, as we move farther away from 2020. So many people are starting to travel again, going to different places, maybe within the country or maybe within neighboring regions or even further regions in other continents in the world. Uh, in this article, she found a great place to stay in a hostel of all places. Now, obviously, staying in a hostel has negative connotation, especially here in our country. It's not ideal to stay at a hostel. Typically, you'd stay at a hotel, preferably. But for other countries, hostel not necessarily is bad. But obviously, a hostel is an option for accommodation for travelers or backpackers that they call it, a more affordable arrangement. But obviously, there are downsides to it in terms of how people utilize the hostel venue as a place to party in a sense. But in this article, it offers a slightly different perspective. So let's take a closer look. So according to insider.com, the Miss Marielle Descalsota stayed at the highest rated hostel in Singapore, which only costs around $40, around 2,000 pesos. Not that expensive actually, a night. And she mentions that it's a great place to stay, but with a slight caveat. So if you don't mind plenty of rules in that location. So is the rules too excessive, or is it necessary to maintain their not persona, the ambience of their venue here? So let's take a closer look. So as you can see here, she's staying in one of the hostels here, and you can see that it looks similarly to Japan's Capsules Hotel. It's very small, similar to like I won't say like a coffin, but it looks spacious enough. You can sit properly, but take note. I think she meant, what was her height here? We'll take a look. But obviously, if you're a very tall person, it's difficult to sit properly. But you can see here, there's proper lighting. You can hang clothes on the sides, and there's, I think, outlets so you can charge your devices. I don't think they have TVs inside here, but we'll investigate further. Anyway, so the place she's talking about is the Dream Lodge, one of the highest rated hostel in TripAdvisor and Google reviews in Singapore. So an overnight stay in a female only room costs around $40. So, but the downside is backpackers had to follow lots of rules, like taking a 5 minute shower and not eating outside the pantry. I think the rules for eating outside of the pantry so that you can keep the place clean. I think that seems reasonable. For the 5 minute showers, obviously they don't want you wasting the water is the main contention. But if it take longer taking, if it takes you longer than 5 minutes to clean yourself, then maybe we need to rethink our process here. But I think for a basic stay in a hostel, I think that's more than reasonable. So let's look further. What are their other rules here? Okay. So this is what it looks like from the outside. So it's not that big. I mean, it looks like a typical house in Singapore. It's two-story building. Now, I don't know how deep is the building. So let's see what's her experience. So she spent a night in a space-themed hostel in the heart of Singapore, backpackers district. So it was her first experience. The living space was dirty. Uh, The living space was dirty. The pod had no ventilation, and the always had a serious stench. So obviously, that's the typical, memories if you're staying at a hostel, because obviously, the accommodations is very affordable, cheap. So you expect everything else to be that bad. But in this case, let's see what's her experience here. Uh, so the hostel, which is housed in the 1950s shop house, had glowing reviews, even being number one in TripAdvisor, as mentioned, with a full 5-star rating from 222 reviewers. So that's a lot, but still plenty. So it's not to say that it's the reviews is slightly or highly skewed. Anyway, so she booked a single bed pod in a female only room in a recent weekend with $52 or $38 dollars here. So let's see what it looks like. So located in a residential area in central Singapore. So it's surrounded by apartments, hawker centers, and house of worship. So she mentioned it's a 5 minute walk from the Lavender MRT. So it's not that far. Still a ways. Now let's see what it looks like inside. So when she arrived at the hostel, she was surprised to find her name plastered on the door, knowing that she's coming in. Okay, let's see what the interior would look like. So she tried checking in, but in a few minutes later, the receptionist Joey came to greet her. I had to fill out some paperwork about vaccination status. I think that's one of the main things that you have to concern with when you're traveling is your vaccination status. So getting vaccinated is important, and getting your vaccination card is important, or the details if you can save it in your smartphone, so that it makes it easier when you're traveling abroad, when whether you're being asked in the airport or in customs or wherever you're traveling in other parts of the world. Anyway, so Joey handed her the key, locker key, and bracelet, which had a tag that accessed that many security pads in the hostel here. So you can see here the hostel had an open pantry and living space for guests to work, eat, and socialize. So she mentioned it was quite spacious considering how narrow the building looked from the outside. So guests generally come to the living spaces like this one on their downtime, partially because eating in the sleeping pod is not allowed. And I think it makes a great idea so that people who are visiting in that place will have a chance to socialize with one another, especially if you're not allowed to eat anywhere else in just in this particular space. So she commented that it was a quiet hostel, which is I think that's a plus. But only so for guests throughout the stay. So obviously, it takes a certain type of people to stay. If you can't follow the rules, obviously you have options to stay in other places. Now, what's interesting in this place is that they do offer a mural photos beside the shoe rack. So you can see here photos for guests who have stayed in the hotel, which is a tremendous idea. So you can see similar to what we were discussing earlier with regards to how uh, Disney is trying to offer a augmented reality in terms of photos. Now, obviously, this is not augmented reality, but it's something creating a pin with your photos so that people could see. Yeah, can I see? Do I know anyone who has stayed here? And just for prosperity. I mean, it creates a lot of being collaborative and being one with community, which is I think everyone would enjoy. Even I would enjoy. So the hostel says some 42,000 guests have already stayed in the place. And to get a photo, it took a moment to look at the hundreds of pin back buttons with people's faces on them and contemplated having mine done. Now, the interesting part here is that the process is done for free by the hostel. I think it's more for marketing purposes, which I think is tremendous, so that it gets you can get a copy, and hopefully they'll have one so that they can post it so that other people can see who have stayed here as well, which is I think is a great PR stunt here. Anyway, continuing here. So there were basic rules for their bathroom. So let me share here. So if you can see closely, so here the bathroom rule states, if it is up, put it down. If it's on, turn it off. And then if it's dirty, clean it. And if you're taking a long time, hurry up. So obviously to expedite what you're supposed to be doing and don't waste your time and other people's time and the hostel's time as well. And obviously they use the rules by just plastering in their walls, like house rules: love each other, hold your head up high, laugh a lot, try everything once, say please and thank you, and so forth here. So I mean, nothing too exaggerated to the point that it will ruin your experience. I think it's more common sense in reality. Even if when I'm staying in a hotel, I mean I tend to do that, you know But for intensive purposes, I mean, they're trying to be practical here, so which is, it's expected. So I mean, that's something that caught my attention. But one of the interesting rules that they mention here is, so no eating in the rooms as mentioned, and they keep the room lights switched off from 10 p.m. to a.m. That, well, it makes sense for saving electricity, but it seems like more of akin to a prison if you think about it. So I don't know how I feel about it, because what if I want to turn on my lights, if I want to do something, if I can't sleep? I think there has to be flexibility. I think trying to save on electricity makes a lot of sense. Save water is a lot of sense, and not wasting food, not contributing to litter is sensible in my point. But having a time frame on when lights should be turned on and turned off in this case, uh, I don't know, that's just my taste. Maybe I could be wrong here. Now, according to Chen here, he mentions that has kicked out around 10 guests since they have opened because they didn't follow the rules. So they're very strict, and it means if you cannot follow those simple rules, then you'll be kicked out. And I think that's only a small subset of the whole, 42,000 people who have already stayed there has enjoyed their place. And take note, it's very affordable. And if you're staying in that place and you're trying to visit near within the place, and which is makes convenient, I think it's a good place to stay. Even I would consider maybe staying there for a day or two just to see the place if I get the chance to visit Singapore in the future. So he goes on to say that those bad reviews are those who can't follow rules. They are more alpha in their character. And again, at the end of the day, you have choices at the end of the day whether you want to stay in that place or not. If you prefer clean versus not so clean. If you prefer quiet place versus not so quiet place. And, you get the good with the bad here. And the beds, as I mentioned, it looks like a capsule if you were to see this one. So here you can see there are four boxes here. So it's like a coffin, but a bigger one. And nothing too fancy. I mean, obviously for a hostel, your goal here is to stay here, sleep a bit, and then travel to wherever you're going to go next here. So it's nothing too fancy, but again, the caveats here mentions about ventilation, but especially in humid areas in Singapore, obviously air conditioning is important, so that you're not sweating like a sauna in other areas as well here. But again, being tidy is important to the owner, so that it's less difficult to clean the whole place, as to rather than have to vacuum them, mop the place, and so forth here. Now, would you visit the place? Yeah, I would think so. I mean, it's not too fancy, but for its purpose, I think it does a great job. And obviously, trying to differentiate this particular hostel to other types of hostel. Hopefully, more hostels could adopt this type of approach, so that you can get more interesting people staying at your place. Maybe team it a different set of teams. I think could capture a new set of travelers as well here. And question is, would you stay in their hostel here? Leave your comments down below if you're interested.